Feels like every week we're hearing new catastrophic engine failures from almost every brand, like Mercedes-Benz, BMWs, Hyundais, Kias, and even Toyotas now are building engines that are making front page news because of catastrophic engine failures. What's happening with these cars and vehicles? What's happening to the engines, the quality control, technology? We want to break this down. I'm going to give you some of the big examples of some of the biggest, ugliest catastrophic engine issues delivered by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and why in fact they're a problem, how many people are impacted, and things you definitely want to keep an eye out for. You and I are in this together, dealing with new cars, trucks, and SUVs that are hitting the market that may or may not be tried and tested, and the ultimate expense is up to you and me. Let's get into it now.
Life's too short to drive boring cars.
We might as well dive right in and talk about some of those car brands that we knew and once trusted, but unfortunately they're seeing a whole host of issues. For example, Honda, the latest, we're hearing about 295,000 vehicles from the Acura MDX, the Pilot as well, that need some programming. 295,000 engines that could be at risk, who are running, losing power, performance issues, catastrophically failing. And that's all before a previous failure that we heard a short time ago, where 1.4 million V6 Honda and Acura products, the Pilots, the Ridgelines, and some of the Acuras, MDX for example, with that 3.5 liter V6 naturally aspirated engine that was known for bulletproof performance, unfortunately has a misfit in machining, and there was allegedly some problems with the rod bearings, potentially taking out almost 1.5 million units. Yes, Honda's also had issues with that 1.5 liter turbo 4-cylinder engine with oil and fuel dilution issues, pushing too much fuel pressure past the piston rings, causing all kinds of fuel and dilution issues, naturally leading to premature engine failure, deterioration, wear, tear, and it ultimately means more time in the shop for consumers to get their vehicles diagnosed, updated, programming changes, and it all just means more time and more money out of our pockets. But Honda's not the only one that we once trusted. Of course, we're seeing other brands like Hyundai. Remember the Theta 2 engine? You think back around 2011 up to almost current generation. Theta 2 generation engines where they had rod bearing issues. So bad, in fact, many of the dealers cannot get the engines into the customers' vehicles in adequate time. It's just taking too long. There's far too much backlog to get those engines replaced. They've also had issues with potential fires, wiring harness issues, ABS controllers where the brake fluid can leak into the electronics and potentially cause a fire. And the latest is the 3.3 liter V6 that has been known to potentially have some issues as well. That's right, the Lambda 2 GDI engines as well by Hyundai is also known to have some serious engine issues. But it doesn't begin and end with the usual culprits. You know, the Hyundai Kias, everybody knows and talks about them. Everybody now knows a lot of the Honda issues, but as well, Ford, no shortage there. You know, the 3-cylinder EcoBoost engines that are running oil pump belts as well as timing belts submersed in oil, and the source of many catastrophic failures. The 2.0 EcoBoost engine has been a big issue as well. It doesn't take long to go far back and we start to see engines that come out of the Ford camp with all kinds of problems. The 6-liter diesel engine that they had way back in 2004, EGR valves, all kinds of blown head gaskets and the like. All kinds of troubles for Ford. Lots of head gaskets consuming of coolant and just burning oil. Bad turbos, wastegates, you name it. Lots of troubles in the camp. And I've got a whole pile of list of other engines that have been a real problem and a real bear for a lot of consumers. When you look at one of these older Hondas, this is an example which I'll get into why these older vehicles often last for 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 miles easily. And this one here is from 2012. These vehicles are literally built almost to last forever. They'll slowly start to consume oil, and after 300,000, 400,000 miles, you may just want to rebuild the engine. And they generally don't sustain those catastrophic failures. See, because a lot of these engine failures that we're finding out through NHTSA aren't just a gradually wearing out engine that with time and tons of miles that they start to wear out and then you decide you need to rebuild them. No, most of these engines are failing because of something major, catastrophic, rod bearings, blown engines, blown parts. In other words, clunk, clunk, chunk, and it stops. That's not how these generally fail, but a lot of these new engines are. These older engines have a few simple attributes. First of all, They're a port fuel injection, so it's simple. They have a combination of air going in and a basic electronic fuel injector going, putting a little squirt of fuel into each cylinder in a common plenum. Very simple setup, and it goes right into the upstream low pressure air inside the intake manifold side of the system. And also, there's no turbos in these vehicles, and they're built from a time when these manufacturers actually cared about their reputation, and they put out vehicles that they knew would not bring back all kinds of warranty claims. These vehicles were built to last, and customers were happy driving these vehicles hundreds of thousands of miles. You know, you have easy parts to access, easy there, O2 sensor easy, oil changes are very easy to access. And everything here is very accessible, simple, and affordable. That's why people do their maintenance, and they last forever. So there's a big recall that just came out. Almost 900,000 General Motors customers are on the hook now. NHTSA recognized that there's potential catastrophic rod bearing issues. That's right, the L87, their V8 engine, the 6.2 liter V8 that's ultra popular. I've had lots of people reach out to me and say, hey, just bought this Yukon and it only has 18,000 miles on it and the engine let go. That seems to be a common trait and a lot of common conversations. We never realized it was such an issue until we started hearing more and more complaints. But now NHTSA has their fingers in this and recognize that almost 900,000 customers may have to get their 2019 to 2024 engines replaced if they carry the L87 engine by Chevy or GM. That's right, it impacts Chevy, GMC, Cadillac, and the likes. And any vehicle carrying that engine within that time frame is suspect. And not only that, we know that General Motors has had a ton of issues with lifters, where if you had a broken lifter, they would replace it on their 5.3 or the 6.2 liter V8. This was an issue before. That was another recall. We don't even want to get into the whole conversation of transmissions and electric problems. Engines are the problem right now that we're talking about, and sadly, there's way too many catastrophic engine failures. What's going on in this industry? And it feels like an absolute landslide of catastrophic failure. Now, Toyota products like this have always been very reliable, and generally people trust the brand, and that's why Toyota has gained such a reputation for reliability. I mean, the Camry is still a pretty reliable vehicle, and even with these ones here, you get that 2.5 liter 4-cylinder, makes about 200 horsepower. You could also get the outgoing 3.5 liter V6 under the hood, very reliable too. And those have always been known to be some of the most reliable vehicles. The Camry, the Corolla have been always trusted and tried, but things have changed. You know, Toyota had some issues with their 5.7s. They sorted that out. Now it's not uncommon to find those engines with 500, 600,000 miles on a older outgoing generation Toyota Tundra. They've revamped that. They've replaced it now with a 3.4 liter twin turbo V6, the V35A, and now they're sustaining hundreds of thousands of potential failures. That's right, engines are on the hook to be replaced. It's just more of a matter of how quickly can they do it. There's a lot of customers driving around with what they consider ticking time bombs, and those are also at a huge risk of catastrophic main bearing failures, where allegedly there's extra metal particulate from the machining that's made its way through there. And if it's a certain granular size or certain size in general, it could get hung up in the main bearings and take out the rest of the engine. Absolutely catastrophic. You never used to hear about issues like that with Toyota. So the latest Toyota Tundra as well as the Lexus LX600 carry that engine, and they're all on that list for NHTSA as recognized engines that may have that problem. There's actually a multitude of reasons why this might be happening, and for every manufacturer it seems to be a little bit different. One thing is the ever ongoing push to put more vehicles out to market. The improvement on innovation to create vehicles that are more powerful, more fuel efficient, and technology back behind that, like direct fuel injection, turbocharging, are all key contributors to why some of these vehicles are failing prematurely. I mean, Honda, for example, came out with that 1.5. You're talking about a very small displacement with a turbocharger and direct injection. You're a recipe for disaster. Lots of pressure, lots of fuel, and as well, all for the sake of fuel efficiency. And now you've got a V6 like you'll find in these vehicles, and there's been issues with these as well. Now, while that's an older model and an older platform, some of the rod bearing issues with some of these manufacturers could be a supplier issue, could be a care and attention when it comes to prepping these vehicles after post-manufacturing. And as well, there's a lot of procedures that a lot of manufacturers don't do. They build them on the assembly line, put them in, send them out to sea. A good engine builder will always tell you, you put on 1,000, 2,000 miles, do a quick oil service right away, gets all the stuff out of the engine, flushes it, and then you do your next oil service at a longer interval. So there's a lot of practices that are not done anymore. And for the sake of efficiency and maximizing profits, a lot of these manufacturers just cut to the chase, get the vehicles out to production as quick and physically possible. They're selling more vehicles than they've ever sold before. And a big reason for a lot of these problems is they're pushing, there's rushing. There's a lot of engineering behind a lot of these vehicles. I mean, you think about the old GMs and the 350 cubic inch. Those engines were around for a long time. They were simple, low compression, easy, slow turning, and they were very reliable. They didn't change much and they just stayed put. Toyota as well with that 3.5 liter V6. It didn't change a lot and therefore it was reliable. It's when all of the advancements in new technology and these new designs, new engines and new drivetrains to try to be more efficient, to try to be more powerful than their outgoing and some of their competition, they often miss the boat in some cases. A lot of times manufacturers like Toyotas and Hondas have relished in reliability, so they take extra pride. But the chicken tax is one of those taxes and tariffs that has protected the big three, GM, Ford, as well as Ram, and allowed them to build products that aren't necessarily living up to the expectation. Why are we seeing almost 1 million recalls on engines now that should have been around for some time? A lot of this is just pushing products out to market on the sake of you and I, the customers, and now unfortunately they're maximizing profits. And as well, even to get some of these recalls done, sometimes they'll never get sorted. Sometimes it'll take years to get fixed. But the bottom line is inconvenient, it's a problem, and driving down the road with a vehicle that is risking shutting off, blowing up, or catastrophically failing is largely far more of an issue than we ever saw. I mean, a lot of the older vehicles just simply wore out. They didn't catastrophically fail. Yeah, there was problems. You'd wear out brakes, you'd wear out a starter, water pumps would fail. But catastrophic engine failures were not that common. I mean, you talk about the Honda and the V6, they've had some problems there, of course, with the Ridgeline, that 3.5 liter V6 and rod bearing problems in 1.4 million units. Then, of course, Volkswagen and the EA888 engine, lots of oil burning, coolant leaks, oil leaks, as well as all kinds of other issues, water pumps and the like. Stellantis, Jeep Grand Cherokees, no shortage of problems there. Every manufacturer seems to have their issue. But the real big problem is when there's an engine that fails. That's a big issue. And unfortunately, with today's industry, it feels like now the automotive sector and the engines you find in most of these vehicles are failing at epidemic proportions. And with all of that said, be sure to check out that video if you haven't seen it. Why are these modern day direct injected engines imploding? What's going on? There's a lot you're going to want to find out. Hope to see each and every one in the next one. See you real soon. Bye-bye.